welcome to the Single Girl's Guide to Life, your weekly guide to single life living in your 20s and 30s. I'm Chantelle, the coach, a course to life and confidence coach to help women find their confidence in being single, to connect single women together and to make sure that you're embracing that single life of yours, whether you want to be in a relationship one day, soon, or in the future, or you're just quite happy being single and seeing what happens. We had an incredible weekend last weekend. It was the first ever London Single Girls Club event. We went to a meal and then a comedy club after, and it was lovely to be around single women and enjoy an evening out. I could have gone alone. I do a lot of things like that on my own and it doesn't faze me, but it's also nice to meet other singles, to catch up with some that I've seen before at a previous breakfast, but also to meet some new single ladies as well. And we have our next London event taking place in April, which is a bowling event and some food involved. And we also have Essex events going on. Plus, there is an event in Birmingham lined up. We're going to try and head for some social darts at Flight Club. And there is Manchester and Bath in the pipeline coming very shortly too. So if you're not already part of the Single Girls Club, then make sure that you head to the mailing list to join that and keep an eye on those events as they start to get dotted more and more around the UK. It's part of the reason that I, which is related to today's topic, quit my job at Christmas so that I had some capacity to try and get round to more people, to get to more single women, help you connect and start creating some events for you guys to meet one another, to meet me directly, or for me to meet you guys really, and to meet you in person rather than me just be this person that's on TikTok, on Instagram, or the voice that you're listening to right now. And that does bring me to today's episode, which I wanted to talk about from a personal perspective. And the way I think that it infiltrates in our lives, particularly as single women who can come across as very independent and very headstrong. And it's this idea around quitting. It is, as an open statement, completely okay to quit. It is okay to quit anything that you were previously doing. And that can be on a big scale or a small scale. So if I look at my own experiences, in some respects, you could say that I quit my marriage, I quit my relationship when I initiated that conversation to leave and start looking at that. I also, as mentioned, quit my job, much more the word that we normally use, quit. We don't necessarily use that for relationships normally, but it's the same principle, leaving something of your current norm that maybe even fits society's norm, which adds another layer of pressure to it, and doing something different, doing it in a different way. And we can look at that. Quit is obviously a very specific word, but you can quit, you can cancel on occasions with your friends if you class that as quitting in some way, or it could be a longer term project. Normally is generally it. Some people quit uni. My brother quit uni. He returned at a later date when it suited him better. But he quit. He didn't want to do that at that moment in time. And it wasn't, as he realised, the right thing for him. And that's okay. I've thought about the idea of quitting in various forms. And since doing it in two different forms, it's interesting as well because when I have conversations about my decisions and my actions, people go, I couldn't do that. I couldn't leave. It's interesting to understand why, and also how I even managed to do it myself too. There's another way that I quit as well. For those that have heard some of these podcasts before, my degree is in theatre. I am best qualified, or longest term qualified, 3 years of study in theatre sound design, putting speakers into theatres, and my experience would qualify me for that as well. I used to work on many of the West End shows, putting microphones in people's hair. It was a beautiful job. I thoroughly enjoyed that. But the minute I finished university, I quit that and went into teacher training. And the motivations behind that were completely different. They were literally financial. There are lots of good reasons to go into teaching. One of them is there is financial incentives. And at 21, not knowing what I wanted to do, I was like, well, hey, yes, I'm going to make my student loan bigger, but they're going to give me a qualification. I could take that abroad. It gave me more opportunity in my head than the cost of it. But I ultimately quit the thing that I'd studied for 3 years. And maybe those kinds of things, that early on element, set me up to realise that I wanted to follow my own path. And I think that's what's important about quitting. Now, the difficult thing about quitting, leaving something that you have invested time in, is just that. You have invested time, effort, energy into whatever it is, whether it's a relationship, a university course, a job, a career, where you currently live. I've not massively done that one. I've not up sticks and gone somewhere. Well, I haven't quit where I live. I haven't quit my hometown, as it were. I've been in London and Essex, which to me are quite similar in that regard. So I've not experienced that. But that's one of the hardest things about it, because you've put that time and dedication in. University, I put 3 years in. Teaching, and it breaks my heart sometimes. And I don't think I'm finished with the industry. I think I'm finished with practical teaching and that as a practical concept, but education still fascinates me. And I think that's still got a good place in my heart that I'm passionate about. But it is hard because that was 7 years for me. And the relationship I was in as well, that was 7 years too. 7 year classic. Everyone loves the 7 year itch. We'll talk about that one day because I need to read up on the actual, if there's any real science behind 7 years, or if it's just coincidence that you have 7 year itches and things. But quitting is hard because we worry that we've put time and energy into something and we don't want that to go to waste. Now, I don't look back at the relationship, the university course, or my time in that career and think, I've wasted this. Because throughout each of those, I had good experiences, I learnt more, and I developed. Theatre, I still love. I don't do it as a hobby, but I do enjoy going to it. And I continued theatre alongside teacher training and teaching a little bit, here and there where I could help. People still have my numbers. And even, I got a message, I think it was maybe in the summer holidays, just as theatres are starting to open back up, but COVID was still in. They wanted someone for the whole week and I could only do a few days. Still get calls. So I left that full time in 2014. I've worked in theatre still in that time. And whilst it wouldn't be super easy for me to just return, I wouldn't find it difficult, as it were. I would just check my phone and hope that there were some numbers that were still the same. But yeah, realistically, I've left that. Don't do it so much, but I'm helping my aunt out in the summer with a local show. It's still useful to me. I met some lovely people when I was there. It was great to work on those shows. Look at that energy that's still there and almost the respect I have for myself for doing it, because at the time that's what I wanted to do. I can look back now and go, there's a couple of things I might have gone into instead. I could have gone into, maybe should have is a weird phrase to use. Could have gone into like psychology or design. Both of those would have ticked my boxes. But at the time, I didn't care enough about them. At the time, it was all about that. And so then when it flicked to teaching, it was something new, it was something exciting. And I got, really put myself in it, threw myself into projects, got my teeth into it, and had a go. And I don't think quitting, whether that's 2 years in, 5 years in, 10 years in, 20 years in, should be a sign that you have given up and didn't give that period of time your all. It's just that over that time, maybe you've exacerbated everything you can in that scenario. And maybe you just want to try something different. It can often be thought that we're giving up because of all the time we've invested. And part of the difficulty of giving up further, not just to the fact that you've put the time and energy in, is then the commentary around that from the people around you. Particularly anyone that's a little bit older sometimes. Not all, just more a general observation. Because it's a different way of doing things. What are we saying? 50 years ago, you got a job, you stayed in it, you did it forever. And I had a realisation the other day that that's literally what my dad has done. My dad works with pipes. He's not a plumber. He's always very clear about that clarification. Basically, weld really large pipes. I don't really know much more than that. But has always done that. I think he's worked for a few companies, but not many. That is what he's done. He's done a bit of the foreman stuff as part of that. But primarily that's it. No change. No big shift. Sticking with it, doing it, continuing to pay his mortgage. That's fine. And it's not that long ago. My dad's 60 now. So when he started, probably in his 20s, he's done that for 40 years. He's stuck with it. Nowadays, there are so many ways to upskill and to change things up that you don't have to dedicate yourself to just one thing. Gary Vee talks about it a lot, that we should spend our 20s exploring loads of different things. And I think I had a lot of influence from that old sense, and I think a lot of people do get that. And we get this idea, and I saw it in schools when I was still there, that we have to decide at 16 or 18 or 21 what it is we're doing and where we're going. And you should make a decision about what you want to try out. But to imagine that one big decision in your life is going to then determine the next 40, 50, 60 years, and you're not allowed to change it, well, that seems incredibly high pressured to get it right and to know. Now, some people will be fortunate enough to choose the right thing that they are going to stick with forever. Maybe that role, that industry develops into something that can keep fulfilling them. And the same with the choice of person. Maybe everything continues to click, you can get through the difficult patches, and you're moving through life at a similar pace with similar values. But life is much more complex than just choosing one thing, choosing one person, choosing one scenario, and going through it in a really linear way where everything just toddles along, goes up, and you're on a positive trajectory the whole entire time. We know that life is messier than that. We know that we as humans are much more complex than that in how our environment affects us, how our emotions are, how we can change our mind about things. And whilst there should be some consideration for commitment, you should really give things a try and put the energy into something, whether that is a relationship or a career. You give it a shot, you give it your best, rather than giving up and quitting very quickly. There is also no shame in deciding that it's not for you, or it's time to try something different. Now, I don't look at teaching thinking I could never go back to teaching because I quit. Like, in the sense that, would I be judged for having left, gone away, decided that there wasn't a lot more out there? I tried a few things and it wasn't it, and maybe actually teaching is the right thing for me. Whether that's in a year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. If I decide at any point that I want to go back into classrooms, doing that full-time or part-time but full-time, then I'm not going to be put off by the fact that I, at one point, said it wasn't for me. I don't think anything that you say at any moment should be held against you for an extended period of time. Because people change. We change our minds. We want different things. We develop different values thanks to the experiences we have. And for me, even staying in the same job and then staying in the same place can sometimes be limiting. Whereas if you keep the same job but even move workplaces, that can be fulfilling enough. Even though you think you're quitting on that workplace, that business, moving to different places gives you a breadth of experience. And instead of being constantly surrounded by people probably of a similar perspective, you want a place that's going to always offer you a way to grow. You want people that are able to talk to you, communicate with you, and challenge your thoughts, and you can challenge theirs too. There should be learning on both sides and pushing on both sides. When you stay in one place doing one thing, how much development really is there? Especially if the people around you stay the same too. So this idea of quitting being a failure or something that's wrong, I want to challenge today, because just because the people around us don't get it because that's how their lives has been. Luckily, my dad's very open to what I want to do. His way that he did life is not put on me directly. Don't get me wrong, that would have been influenced naturally in the conversations that we were having and the things that he would have said to me naturally when I was a child. That can't be helped. But when I've then changed my mind, it hasn't necessarily been a negative. I did get pushback from certain people about different decisions. When I decided to go into teaching, that was more of a challenge. People, now I look back, had a very personal attachment to me going into theatre for one. Other people had a personal attachment to their experience of teaching and weren't sure if I could do it. There was doubt, or, you know, they thought that I had a different impression of how it would be and that it would be idyllic and wonderful. I don't know what I expected of schools. I just wanted to try, and quite frankly, when you get resistance, sometimes it spurs you on even more to do it. It's not to prove myself to them, it's to prove to myself that I wasn't as wrong as I could have been about it. I'm still that optimist. I'm still the glass half full person. So even when things are difficult, I revel in that. I enjoy challenges. And teaching is one of the most challenging jobs I think there could ever be. You're dealing with lots of complex human beings at any given moment, especially secondary school. So sometimes it is hard to quit because you've invested time and energy and other people are questioning you and your decisions. And if that is en masse, that can feel really difficult. And another thing that can also impact this is that you might not know anyone that's done it. In each of the scenarios that I referred to there, uni, changing path, leaving a relationship of that length of time, and quitting a job to work it out, I can't say I knew anyone exactly in that scenario or a similar one quite that I felt I could refer to. Somehow I still managed to do them all. Maybe it was the support I had when I changed at uni from my boyfriend at the time. Maybe that was enough, and there were enough positive encouragements from other people, from other family members, that allowed that to happen. Leaving the relationship was one of the hardest ones because I hadn't known many people be in that length of a relationship and then leave and have the marriage involved too at the age that I was at, that weren't then much older now. There was no one live doing it. And then leaving the job as well. In that sense, I had no direct models, but there were lots of influences about, as mentioned, you know, social media and the right kind of social media in my sense, such as someone like Stephen Bartlett and Gary Vee, who encourage you to basically try stuff out if you can. Obviously a very privileged position to be able to quit a job and take that kind of insecurity of finances and see how you go. But there was also statistics around the Great Resignation that I was reading and going, okay, there are other people out there. I might not know them, but stats are showing lots of people are thinking about this and quite a lot of people are starting to do it too. So even if you can't find an exact role model, though I think that it would be massively helpful because you can then ask them what they did and what they'd do differently if they did it again. I can definitely think of, in the latest two scenarios, loads of things I'd do differently now that I've done it, and maybe someone else would have known. I'm not going to dwell on it. If anyone asked me, I would give my honest feedback and evaluation of how I did and how I tackled things and what worked and what is still working and what I could have done better. But if you can convince yourself through, sometimes celebrity examples are great. You know, if I go back to someone I just referred to there, Stephen Bartlett, he quit school and he quit university. He quit school when he was pursuing other things within the school. I don't know how many GCSEs he got, if any, but I know he wasn't engaged with education. He gave uni a shot. I think it was the first day, not very far into his course, that he then speaks about in both the book, Happy Sexy Millionaire, and on his podcast at times, that he just knew it wasn't for him. And for me, he is that inspiration of, you can't just do what everyone else is doing if it isn't the right thing for you. And sometimes that has influenced how I've made some of my decisions. It is riskier because there is more uncertainty around it. to stay in a job and move up through a company, or even to switch roles within an industry but stay within it, is probably a semi-predictable pathway. There are also people that do that and the pathway is all over the place still. But there is probably a pathway that you could follow and know what's kind of going to happen, and you can see the moving parts happening as different people leave and move on and things happen. But quitting and finding those examples, whether that's in someone you know directly, in a story, or in statistics, can just be that little thing that gives you the nudge, that pushes you on. And Matthew Hussey's definition of confidence, somewhere he said this, paraphrasing, that confidence is knowing that you'll be okay no matter what happens. I'm sure that's what he says. Disclaimer, if it's not, I apologise. The phrase has come out of his mouth. And I think he talks about that in a number of contexts, things like relationships. But if you think of confidence like that, thinking and applying that to quitting, I knew that when I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing from January quite, that I would work it out. I was not exactly scared. I was more excited to see how I could do it, that challenge. And maybe that was what mattered to me. Quitting gave me something different to try, a different way of doing it, a different model, something to, again, throw myself into, get my teeth into, and knowing that I'd be okay no matter what. The big red button is to go back into teaching if I need to. I don't hate it. The system has some issues in terms of workload and long hours, no doubt. But I wouldn't not go back into it, and that is a good backup to have. I also had ideas already of how to generate income so that it wasn't too long of a gap of having nothing coming in, so didn't then increase the pressure on me having to find a job. I wasn't even sure if I wanted a job, and I still toy with that idea now. To think that I've quit and now I've got everything worked out is also a very naive thought. And that goes for the time when I left my relationship. I didn't know what was going to happen. Quitting can be scary because you don't know what's coming next. In any scenario, it's the unknown. Embracing the unknown is the exciting part of life. Sometimes I think we're afraid to quit because we'd rather stay with what we know rather than risk the unknown. Even if the known is a little bit mundane, a little bit the samey, a little bit normal, safe. Uncertainty can be exciting. It can also be scary. But it's also got lots of excitement to it. It doesn't all have to be something that you worry about. So the message today is that it's okay to quit if it's not right for you, particularly if there is a scenario that's really bringing you down. I think that has to be said too. Whether you are experiencing something like a quarter-life crisis where you think you should be further ahead than you are, but you're stuck because of so many practicalities, and sometimes you can't quit. Sometimes those practicalities mean that you can't quit right now. But what can you start doing to make scenarios better? But if you've thought about quitting and you aren't tied in because of a practicality such as money, resources, everything that you need to be able to feel safe and to live and build upon. But you're not because of one of those things I've said now, which is worrying about the investment you've already made, about what other people will say, not knowing what will happen because you don't know someone or have an example, and being unsure about the uncertainty of what could happen, then just examine that in a bit more detail. For me, it comes back to when I had my operation. Before that, when I was told I was going to be having an operation, the rate of death was not superbly high, but to me, the thought of having an operation meant that my sudden potential of death slightly increased. Slightly. If you're on an operating table, then chances are a little bit higher. And it was thoughts around death and regrets of the dying that I've previously referred to on here before, and thinking, I just don't want to get to the end and have regretted things. I need to push past that and make sure that I am continuing forth with trying something new. Like, this doesn't seem to be quite right for me, and whilst I've had a blast, I want to give something else a try. And it's that motivation for me. And that examination, it took some time. I was told about my operation last March, and I actually had the operation in June. By that point, I was really okay with the idea of having an operation. But the other concepts that it had raised about how I lived my life to date continue to put in question what I probably had started to realise when I decided to leave my relationship, and the security of that, and the 7 years from 19 to 26 that had covered. It's something that was clearly sitting there, and there's things that I still want to explore. And I don't think even if I explore now and choose to do something, that won't change in the future. Fixating ourselves on the idea that once we've found one thing, we've got to stick with it forever would be wrong. Take another example. These are not female empowerment people. Why do always male examples come to my mind? But take, for example, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Wrestler. Turned actor. I know, you could argue wrestling is acting to some degree, I guess. But, there is this idea that you don't have to stay in the scenario you're in. And thinking that life is going to stay exactly as it is, and that you must stay exactly as it is, doesn't have to be the case. Our lives present us with so many opportunities nowadays that we can change. It might not be as quick a change as quitting. I still had to hand a notice in and do 4 months. It might not be practical. You might have to phase the change, which I highly advise, by the way, if you can. There's some actual advice to come back from. But it's all these different ideas around quitting. There isn't shame in quitting. Quitting means that you are pursuing what you want to do, and you're moving past the expectations that are around you, because there's so many things that could be keeping you in something that you're not sure about, that's not clicking. And one little moment of concern doesn't necessarily need to be the thing that makes you quit. A couple of concerns even don't need to be the thing that make you quit. But if it keeps coming up, if you keep getting that niggling feeling like, I think there's something else I need to be doing in whatever scenario it is, explore it. See what you're really thinking about it. Meditate on it, journal it, talk it out with some people that you know aren't going to try and influence what you do. And say that. I just want to get some thoughts out. I'm not looking for advice. I just want to air what I'm thinking at the moment. Can you help me? Find that friend that's really good at that. And know that if you do decide to quit, it can be okay to quit. I hope that that's given you a little bit of an insight into not sticking with everything all the time, and realising that this world is a lot more varied than that. Until next time, everybody, keep thriving.